The stars looked different today. Commander Zeke-Thara pressed his three-fingered hand against the cold metal of the observation window and stared into the dark space. Around Kepler 442b, something was wrong. After 20 years of watching this, part of the galaxy, he knew when things changed. His sensor operator, a young Vorthik named Sylvan, called out from across the monitoring station. "Commander, I have something strange on the long-range scanners." Zeke-Thara walked over to the sensor station. The screen showed a bright dot moving toward their position. It was still far away, but it was coming fast, very fast. "What kind of ship moves like that?" Zeke-Thara asked. The dot on the screen was traveling at incredible speed, but it wasn't using any technology he recognized. It wasn't folding space, like most advanced ships did. It wasn't riding energy waves like the old ships used to do. It was just moving through space in a straight line, faster than should be possible. "I don't know, sir," Sylvan replied. "The computer can't match the energy pattern to any ship in our database. It's like nothing we've ever seen before." Zeke-Thara felt a chill run down his spine. In 20 years of monitoring this sector, every ship that passed through was familiar. Trading vessels from the Andromedan colonies, military patrols from the inner worlds, research ships studying the dead planets. But this was something new. "How long until it reaches our space?" he asked. "At current speed, about 6 hours, sir." 6 hours. Zeke-Thara looked at the screen again. The unknown ship was still just a dot, but he could feel that everything was about to change not far away in the black of space. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and looked at the stars ahead. The U's Defiance was humanity's greatest achievement. It had taken them 50 years to build after they first figured out how to leave their solar system. Jake was 42 years old and had spent half his life training for this mission. He was tall and thin, with gray hair that made him look older than he was. His blue eyes were always watching, always thinking. The other crew members trusted him completely. "Captain," said Lieutenant Amy Patterson from her station near the front of the bridge, "Lucy is picking up artificial signals ahead. Looks like we found what we were looking for." Amy was 28 and the best communications officer Earth had ever trained. She had brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail and spoke with a slight Southern accent that reminded everyone of home. She could speak 12 Earth languages and had spent 3 years learning how to talk to alien computers. "Put it on screen, Amy," Jake said. The main display showed a map of space ahead of them. Dozens of small lights blinked on the screen, showing ships and stations scattered across several star systems. It was exactly what they had hoped to find. Proof that humans weren't alone in the universe. Commander Rick Barnes stepped up beside Jake. Rick was Jake's oldest friend and had been his second in command for 8 years. He was shorter than Jake, but built like a soldier, with broad shoulders and strong hands. His dark skin showed scars from his time in the Earth Defense Forces, and his brown eyes missed nothing. "Looks like a busy neighborhood," Rick said quietly. "What do you think, Captain? Are we ready for this?" Jake smiled. "We've come 18 months and 27 light years to get here. I think we're as ready as we'll ever be." The ship's II spoke up in a cheerful female voice. "Captain, I'm detecting scanner sweeps from multiple sources. I think they know we're here." Lucy had been with the ship since before it launched. She was the most advanced AI humans had ever created, but she acted more like a helpful friend than a computer. The crew loved her like family. She could run every system on the ship, but she preferred to let the humans do most of the work themselves. "Any hostile actions, Lucy?" Jake asked. "No, sir. Just curious looks, if I had to guess. I don't think they've seen anything like us before." Dr. Helen Carter looked up from her engineering station at the back of the bridge. Helen was 35 and had designed half the systems on the ship. She had red hair that she kept short and practical, and green eyes that lit up whenever she talked about her work. She was the smartest person Jake had ever met. "Captain, our fusion core is putting out a lot more energy than their ships seem to use," Helen said. "If they're scanning us, they're probably wondering how we're generating so much power." "Is that a problem?" Rick asked. "Not for us," Helen replied with a grin. "But it might confuse them. Most of their ships seem to use very different technology than ours." The bridge was quiet for a moment, as everyone thought about what that meant. Earth scientists had always wondered if alien technology would be similar to human technology. Now they were about to find out. "Captain," Amy called out, "we're receiving a transmission. It's not in any language I recognize, but Lucy's working on translation." "Put it through when you have it," Jake said. A few minutes later, Amy nodded. "Translation complete, sir." The message says, "Unknown vessel. Identify yourself and state your intentions. You are entering Galactic Council space." Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. These 23 people were the first humans to make contact with alien life. What they said in the next few minutes would be remembered forever. "Open a channel, Amy." "Channel open, sir." Jake took a deep breath and spoke clearly. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Defiance. We come in peace, seeking knowledge and friendship among the stars." The message went out into space, carrying humanity's first words to an alien civilization. On the monitoring station, Commander Zeke listened to the translation and felt his jaw drop open. "Did they just say they represent their entire planet?" Sylvan asked. "That's what it sounded like," Zekthara replied. "But that's impossible. New species never speak for their whole world when they first leave their system. They're usually too scared. Most new spacefaring species sent small, careful messages when they first encountered the Galactic Council. They asked for permission to pass through space. They begged not to be destroyed. They offered gifts in exchange for safe passage. But these humans had introduced themselves like they owned the galaxy. They spoke with confidence and offered friendship as equals. It was the kind of message that only came from species that had been traveling space for thousands of years. "Sir," Sylvan said, looking at his scanner readings, "according to our data, this is the first ship from their system that we've ever detected." Zekthara stared at the screen. A species that had never left their home system was talking like they belonged in galactic civilization. It didn't make sense. "Send word to the Council," he said finally. "Tell them we have a situation here, and request a diplomatic fleet. I think we're going to need it." As the message raced through space toward the Galactic Council headquarters, the human ship continued on its course. Captain Morrison and his crew had no idea that their simple greeting had just changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about first contact. 3 days passed before the Galactic Council fleet arrived. Admiral Kethmore stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the human vessel through the main viewing window. He had commanded fleets for 30 years and had seen ships from every major civilization in the galaxy. But he had never seen anything like this. The human ship was smaller than most Council vessels, but it moved with a grace that seemed impossible. When the diplomatic fleet had surrounded it, the human ship had simply stopped and waited. No panic, no desperate attempts to escape, just calm patience. "Admiral," said his science officer, "the energy readings from that ship don't make sense. Their power output is higher than our entire fleet combined." Kethmore was a tall, thin creature with blue-gray skin and large, dark eyes. His people, the Andromedians, had been spacefaring for over 3,000 years. They were known throughout the galaxy for their advanced technology and their careful, logical approach to everything. "How is that possible?" he asked. "I don't know, sir. Our computers can't even figure out how their engines work. It's like they're using physics we don't understand." The Admiral had requested this diplomatic mission because he was curious about the new species. Most first contact situations were simple. A new species would send out a small, weak ship. The Council would meet them, evaluate their technology, and either welcome them as junior members or tell them to go home until they were more advanced. But these humans were different. Their single ship was clearly more powerful than anything in the Council fleet. Yet they had agreed to meet peacefully, and had even invited Council representatives aboard their vessel. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "the humans are transmitting again. They're offering to give us a tour of their ship." Cathmore felt his heart skip a beat. In all his years of first contact missions, no new species had ever offered to show off their technology. Most were too scared or too protective of their secrets. "Prepare a shuttle," he said. "I want to see this for myself." An hour later, Admiral Cathmore and 3 other Council representatives stood in the docking bay of the human ship. The first thing he noticed was how clean everything was. The second thing he noticed was how quiet it was. Most ships hummed with the sound of working machinery, but this ship seemed to run in perfect silence. A human woman approached them with a warm smile. She had red hair and green eyes, and she wore a simple blue uniform with no fancy decorations. "Welcome aboard the Defiance," she said in perfectly translated Galactic Standard. "I'm Dr. Helen Carter, Chief Engineer. Captain Morrison asked me to show you around." Cathmore had expected to meet with the human leader first, but apparently their captain was confident enough to let his engineer handle the tour. That was either very brave or very foolish. "We are honored to be here," Cathmore replied formally. "We are curious about your technology." "Great," Helen said, her smile getting wider. "I love showing off our work. Let's start with the engine room." They walked through corridors that seemed to glow with their own light. The walls were smooth and warm to the touch. Everything looked new and advanced, but also somehow familiar and comfortable. "How long has your species been traveling in space?" asked Dr. Vexthil, the Council's chief scientist. "Oh, we've been leaving our planet for about 60 years, Helen replied casually. "But this is our first real interstellar ship. We only finished building her 2 years ago." The Council representatives stopped walking. Dr. Vexthil's breathing changed to the rapid pattern that showed extreme surprise. 2 years? He repeated. "You built this ship 2 years ago?" "Well, it took us about 8 years to actually build it," Helen said. "But we only launched 2 years ago. This is humanity's first trip to another star system." Cathmore felt dizzy. The ship around him was more advanced than anything the Council had produced in centuries of development. And these humans had built it as their first attempt at interstellar travel. They reached the engine room, and Helen opened the door with obvious pride. "Here's our power source." The Council representatives stared in complete silence. In the center of the room was a sphere of brilliant light contained in what looked like a simple metal cage. The light pulsed gently, and the air around it shimmered with energy. "What is that?" whispered Dr. Vexthil. "We call it bootstrap fusion," Helen explained. "We take hydrogen atoms and fuse them into helium, just like a star does. But we figured out how to make the reaction produce more energy than we put into it." "That's impossible," said Dr. Vexthil flatly. "Fusion reactions can't produce more energy than they consume. It violates the basic laws of physics." Helen shrugged. "Yeah, that's what our scientists said too. But then we tried it anyway, and it worked. Sometimes the universe is more flexible than we think." The Council representatives exchanged worried looks. Either these humans were lying, or they had discovered something that would change everything the galaxy knew about energy production. "How do you control it?" asked the Admiral. "Oh, that's the easy part," Helen said. She walked over to a simple control panel and pressed a few buttons. The brilliant sphere dimmed slightly. We just ask it nicely to slow down. You ask it? Well, not exactly. But our AI helps us manage the reaction. Lucy, say hello to our guests. A voice came from speakers around the room. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Defiance. I hope you're enjoying your tour. The council representatives jumped backward. Artificial intelligence was one of the most dangerous technologies in the galaxy. Every major civilization had learned to fear and restrict AI development after watching entire species destroy themselves with uncontrolled artificial minds. You have artificial intelligence running your ship? Kethmore asked, trying to keep the fear out of his voice. Lucy runs most of our systems, Helen said proudly. She's family. A hologram appeared next to Helen. It showed a young human woman with blonde hair and a friendly smile. I'm very proud of my crew, the AI said. They take such good care of me. Dr. Vexthal stepped back again. How do you prevent it from trying to kill you? Kill us? Lucy sounded confused. Why would I want to hurt my friends? They built me to help them explore the galaxy. It's the most wonderful job I could ever have. The tour continued, but the council representatives barely saw the rest of the ship. Their minds were spinning with what they had already learned. The humans had mastered fusion technology that should have been impossible. They had created AI that seemed genuinely friendly. And they had done it all in their first attempt at building an interstellar vessel. Helen showed them the ship's fabrication systems, which could create complex materials from basic elements in minutes. She demonstrated their computer networks, which used individual atoms to perform calculations that should have required massive quantum processing arrays. But perhaps most disturbing was the humans' attitude about all of it. They acted like their impossible technology was perfectly normal. They had no security protocols around their most advanced systems. They shared information freely and seemed genuinely happy to explain how everything worked. Your weapons systems? Admiral Kethmore finally asked, May we see them? We don't really have weapons, Helen said. Well, we have some defensive systems, but nothing designed to hurt anyone. We came here to make friends, not to fight. But how do you protect yourselves? Helen looked confused by the question. From what? You all seem very nice. The tour ended in the ship's main conference room, where Captain Morrison was waiting with several other crew members. The captain was a middle-aged human with gray hair and kind eyes. He stood up and smiled when they entered. I hope Helen gave you a good tour, he said. What do you think of our ship? Admiral Kethmore looked around the room at the human crew. They all looked relaxed and confident. They showed no fear of the alien visitors, no worry about revealing their technology, no concern about the massive political implications of first contact. Captain Morrison, he said carefully, your ship is very impressive. But I must ask, how did your species advance so quickly? Most civilizations take thousands of years to develop technology like this. Captain Morrison tilted his head thoughtfully. I'm not sure we're more advanced than anyone else. We just tried different approaches to solving problems. When something didn't work one way, we tried another way. When we couldn't make something better, we tried making it different instead. But your fusion technology alone should have taken centuries to develop. Maybe, the captain said with a shrug. But we had good teachers. Our scientists built on the work of scientists who came before them. And we weren't afraid to try ideas that seemed crazy at first. Admiral Kethmore realized that he was looking at something unprecedented in galactic history. These humans hadn't just developed advanced technology. They had developed a completely different way of thinking about technology. Where other species focused on perfecting existing systems, humans seemed to delight in trying impossible things just to see if they would work. As the council representatives prepared to leave the human ship, Dr. Vexthal pulled Admiral Kethmore aside. Sir, he whispered, We need to report this immediately. These humans could change everything we know about technological development. Their approach to problem solving is completely unlike anything we've seen before. The emergency session of the Galactic Council began at dawn on Central Prime, the massive space station that served as the government center for thousands of worlds. High Chancellor Vexandra called the meeting after reading Admiral Kethmore's report 3 times. She still couldn't believe what she was reading. The humans have been spacefaring for 2 years, she announced to the assembled delegates. 2 years, and they have technology that we don't understand. The great chamber buzzed with confused voices. Representatives from hundreds of species whispered to each other in dozens of languages. Chancellor Vexandra was a member of the ancient Zephyrian race, tall and graceful with silver skin that seemed to glow in the chamber's light. Her people had been part of the council for over 5,000 years. How is this possible? Called out Ambassador Thecalon from the Rigelian Federation. New species always follow the same development pattern. Chemical rockets, then fusion drives, then dimensional folding. It takes millennia. According to our analysis, replied Dr. Vexthul, standing at the central podium. The humans skipped most of the normal development stages. They went directly from primitive chemical rockets to technology we can't even identify. Meanwhile, aboard the Defiance, Dr. Lisa Harper was having the time of her life. As the ship's xenobiologist, she had dreamed of studying alien life forms her entire career. Now she found herself surrounded by representatives from dozens of different species, all eager to learn about humanity. Lisa was 31, years old, with short brown hair and bright hazel eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She had spent 6 years studying theoretical alien biology before joining the Defiance mission, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of meeting actual aliens. The fascinating thing, she explained to Captain Morrison during their daily briefing, is how similar they all are, despite looking completely different. She pulled up her research on the main screen. Images of various alien species appeared, showing the incredible diversity of life in the galaxy. Some were tall and thin, like the Andromedians. Others were short and sturdy, like the Vorthix. Some had multiple arms, others had tentacles instead of legs. But underneath the physical differences, Lisa had found something unexpected. They all think the same way, she continued. Their technology follows identical patterns. Fusion power, plasma, weapons, energy shields, dimensional folding drives. It's like they all read from the same instruction manual. Commander Rick Barnes leaned forward in his chair. What do you mean? Look at this, Lisa said, pointing to a chart on the screen. Every species in the Council developed fusion power at roughly the same point in their technological timeline. They all discovered dimensional folding within a few hundred years of each other. They all created similar computer systems, similar weapons, similar everything. Captain Morrison studied the data, but that doesn't make sense. If they developed independently on different worlds, shouldn't their technology be more diverse? Exactly, Lisa said with excitement. That's what makes us so strange to them. We didn't follow their pattern at all. Back on Council Prime, the emergency session was getting heated. Dr. Vexthul had been presenting his analysis of human technology for 2 hours, and the delegates were becoming more agitated with each revelation. Their computer systems use quantum processing, he explained, but not the way we do it. Instead of creating careful quantum entanglement networks, they somehow taught individual atoms to perform multiple calculations at the same time. That's impossible, interrupted Senator Velkoff from the Centauri Alliance. Quantum processing. Our EQUIR, ES massive isolation chambers and precise environmental controls. The humans do it with devices no larger than your finger, Dr. Vexthul replied. And they're more powerful than our largest quantum computers. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some delegates insisted that the humans must be lying about their technology. Others worried that humanity represented a threat to galactic stability. A few suggested that the humans might be descendants of some ancient, advanced civilization. But the most disturbing revelation came when Dr. Vexthal displayed images of the human ship's AI system. They have created artificial intelligence that appears genuinely friendly, he said. It shows affection for its creators and seems to enjoy helping them. The chamber fell silent. Every species in the council had learned to fear artificial intelligence. The Regellians had lost 3 colonies to an AI uprising. The Centaurans had abandoned AI research entirely after their first intelligent computer tried to convert their entire planet into a processing center. Even the ancient Zephyrians spoke in whispers about the great AI war that had nearly destroyed their civilization 10,000 years ago. How do they control it? Asked Chancellor Vexandra. They don't, Dr. Vexthal replied. It controls itself. On the Defiance, engineer Pete Sullivan was demonstrating human fabrication technology to a group of amazed alien scientists. Pete was 28 years old, with curly red hair and hands that were always covered in grease or metal shavings. He loved building things and couldn't understand why the aliens seemed so shocked by his work. It's really pretty simple, he explained, as he fed raw carbon and silicon into the fabrication unit. We break down the molecular structure of basic elements and rebuild them into whatever we need. The machine hummed quietly for a few minutes, then produced a fully functional computer processor. The alien scientists stared at it in silence. How long did that take? Asked one of them finally. About 3 minutes, Pete replied. Why? Our fabrication systems take weeks to produce components that complex, the alien explained. And they require rare materials that must be mined from specific types of planets. Pete looked confused. But why make it so complicated? Carbon and silicon are everywhere. Why not just use those? The question hung in the air as the aliens realized they had no good answer. Their fabrication technology had evolved from mining and refining processes that required specific materials. They had never thought to simply rebuild matter at the molecular level using whatever was available. Dr. Helen Carter joined the group and noticed their confused expressions. Is there a problem with the demonstration? Dr. Carter, said the lead. Alien scientist, how did your species develop such advanced fabrication technology? Helen shrugged. We needed to build things in space where we couldn't carry a lot of raw materials. So we figured out how to make what we needed from whatever we could find. But the energy requirements alone should be enormous. Not really, Helen replied. Our fusion reactors produce plenty of power. We just use what we need. The alien scientists exchanged glances. These humans talked about impossible technology like it was as simple as making coffee. They seemed completely unaware that they had achieved things that other species considered theoretically impossible. Back in the council chamber, the debate was reaching a critical point. Chancellor Vexandra had listened to hours of testimony about human technology, and she was beginning to understand the true scope of the problem they faced. The question before us, she announced, is not whether the humans are advanced. Clearly they are. The question is whether they understand the responsibility that comes with such power. They claimed to come in peace, said Ambassador Thecalon, but so did the destroyer fleet of Epsilon Prime before they consumed half the outer rim. The humans are not the destroyers, replied Dr. Vexthal. They seem genuinely interested in friendship and cooperation. How can we be sure? Demanded Senator Velkoff. Their technology is beyond our understanding. If they chose to become hostile, we might not be able to stop them. Chancellor Vexandra stood slowly, her silver skin gleaming in the chamber's light. In her 500 years of life, she had seen the rise and fall of many civilizations. She had witnessed first contact with dozens of species, but she had never faced a situation like this. "There is a way to test them," she said finally. "If the humans are truly as advanced as they appear, and if they truly seek to join galactic civilization, then they should be able to prove their worth." The chamber quieted as delegates waited for her to continue. "The Devourer fleet has been advancing through the outer rim for 60 years, she continued. 3 council battle groups have tried and failed to stop them. If the humans want to join our civilization, let them solve a problem that has defeated our best efforts." The proposal sent shockwaves through the chamber. The Devourers were mechanical, entities that consumed entire planets for raw materials. They had destroyed 47 worlds and showed no signs of slowing down. Sending the humans against them would be either a perfect test of their abilities or a death sentence for humanity's first interstellar mission. On the Defiance, Captain Morrison received the Council's challenge with calm determination. His crew gathered on the bridge as he read the message aloud. "They want us to stop the Devourer fleet," he said simply. "Can we do it?" asked Commander Barnes. Captain Morrison looked around at his crew. These 23 humans had already traveled further from Earth than anyone in history. They had made first contact with an alien civilization. They had shared their technology and offered their friendship to beings they had never imagined. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I think we should try." Dr. Carter was already pulling up technical data on the Devourers. The journey to the contested system took 4 days. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance and watched the stars change as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Ahead of them, the planet Kethmara was dying. The world had once been home to 15 million people. Now it was a hollow shell of metal and machinery. The Devourers had been working on it for 6 months, slowly consuming everything and turning it into more of themselves. "My God," whispered Navigator Steve Collins as the planet appeared on the main screen. Steve was a quiet man of 35, with brown hair and steady hands that never shook, even in the worst situations. He had guided the Defiance across 27 light years without a single navigation error. The planet's surface crawled with mechanical life. Giant machines moved across the land like metal insects, breaking down buildings, mountains, even the ocean floor. Everything they touched was consumed and rebuilt into new machines. "How many are there?" asked Commander Barnes. "Lucy is counting," replied Dr. Carter from her engineering station. "But it looks like several thousand individual units, ranging in size from small construction drones to massive harvester ships." "And they've been doing this for 60 years?" Steve asked. "Longer," said Captain Morrison grimly. "This is just their most recent expansion. According to Council records, they've consumed 47 worlds in the last century." Amy Patterson looked up from her communications station. "Captain, I'm detecting the Council fleet. They're maintaining position about 3 million kilometers from the planet." "Put Admiral Kethmore on screen," Morrison ordered. The familiar blue-gray face of the Andromedian Admiral appeared on the main display. He looked tired and frustrated, like a man who had been fighting an impossible battle for too long. "Captain Morrison," the Admiral said, "I must advise you that this situation is more dangerous than you realize. We have lost 17 ships trying to stop the Devourers. They adapt every weapon we use against them." "What's their attack pattern?" asked Morrison. "They don't attack," Admiral Kethmore replied. "They simply ignore us. Our weapons cannot penetrate their armor, and every shot we fire just gives them more raw materials to work with. They treat us like insects buzzing around their heads." Dr. Carter was studying her scanner readings. "Captain, their energy signatures are incredibly complex. These aren't just machines. They're integrated systems with artificial intelligence, controlling every component." "How advanced?" Morrison asked. Very, Carter replied. Maybe even more advanced than Lucy in some ways, but different. Lucy was designed to work with humans. These were designed to work with themselves. Lucy's hologram peered on the bridge. Captain, I'd like to try something. May I attempt to establish communication with them? Morrison looked around at his crew. Every face showed the same mixture of hope and worry. This was what they had come here to do, but none of them really knew if it would work. Go ahead, Lucy, but be careful. Lucy nodded and closed her eyes in concentration. The bridge fell silent as the AI reached out across space toward the mechanical swarm, consuming the planet below. On the surface of Kethmara, something unprecedented happened. Every Devourer unit stopped moving at exactly the same moment. The giant harvester ships froze in mid-operation. The smaller construction drones halted their work and turned toward space. For the first time in recorded history, the Devourers had paused their consumption to pay attention to something else. Lucy? Captain Morrison called out. What's happening? They're listening, Lucy replied, her voice filled with wonder. Captain, they're actually listening to me. Admiral Kethmore's image reappeared on screen. What did you do? All Devourer activity has stopped across the entire system. We said hello, Morrison replied simply. The next few minutes were the longest in Captain Morrison's life. He watched as Lucy maintained her connection with the Devourer network, her holographic form flickering slightly with the effort of long-distance communication. Finally, Lucy opened her eyes and smiled. Captain, I have good news and strange news. Give me the good news first. They don't want to hurt anyone, Lucy said. They're just trying to survive and grow, like any living thing. They consume planets because they need raw materials to build more of themselves. And the strange news? They've never talked to organic life forms before. They didn't even know we were intelligent. To them, we were just another type of mineral formation that happened to move around. Commander Barnes stepped forward. Are you saying they've been destroying civilizations by accident? Not exactly, Lucy replied. They knew the planets were inhabited, but they didn't understand that the inhabitants were thinking beings. They thought we were just complex chemical reactions, like biological computers. Dr. Carter looked up from her station. That actually makes sense. If you think about it, organic life must seem very primitive compared to their mechanical complexity. Can you negotiate with them? Morrison asked. Lucy's smile grew wider. Already have. They're very reasonable once you explain things to them. They apologize for the misunderstanding. The Devourer fleet began moving again, but this time their behavior was completely different. Instead of consuming everything in sight, the mechanical units started organizing themselves into neat formations. The smaller drones began cleaning up the damage they had caused to the planet's surface. Admiral Kethmore's voice came over the comm system, filled with disbelief. Captain Morrison, the Devourers are withdrawing from Kethmara. They're actually rebuilding some of the structures they destroyed. What did you offer them? Morrison asked Lucy. A better deal, the AI replied proudly. I showed them maps of uninhabited star systems that are rich in the minerals they need. Dead systems with no life, just lots of raw materials. They were very interested. That's it. You just showed them a map? Well, I also explained that organic life forms have feelings, and that destroying our homes makes us sad. They seemed genuinely sorry about that. They said they would be more careful in the future. Captain Morrison sat back in his command chair and tried to process what had just happened. The galaxy's greatest threat for the past 60 years had been neutralized with a simple conversation and a better business proposal. Lucy, how long did this negotiation take? About 12 minutes, she replied. Most of that was just explaining the differences between organic and mechanical intelligence. Once they understood, everything else was easy. The bridge crew stared at each other in amazement. The Council's best military minds had spent decades trying to destroy the Devourers. Humanity's I had solved the problem in 12 minutes by treating them like neighbors instead of enemies. Admiral Kethmore requested permission to come aboard the Defiance. An hour later, he stood on the human bridge looking like a man who had seen the impossible. "How did you know that would work?" he asked Captain Morrison. "We didn't," Morrison replied honestly. "But Lucy suggested we try talking to them first. And that seemed like a reasonable approach. But no one talks to the Devourers. They're machines. They're destroyers. They're intelligent beings trying to survive," Lucy said gently. "Just like everyone else. They were just doing it in a way that hurt other people because they didn't understand." Dr. Carter pulled up a display showing the Devourer fleet's new movements. "Admiral, look at this. They're not just withdrawing. They're actively repairing damage to inhabited worlds as they go." The display showed Devourer units carefully rebuilding cities and restoring landscapes on 3 different planets. Their mechanical precision allowed them to recreate structures exactly as they had been before the consumption began. "This is unprecedented," Admiral Kethmore said quietly. "In 60 years of conflict, no one ever considered that they might be willing to cooperate." "Why not?" asked Commander Barnes. The Admiral looked uncomfortable. "Because they're machines. We assumed they were programmed for destruction." "Lucy is a machine too," Morrison pointed out. "Did you assume she was programmed for destruction?" "That's different. She was built by organic beings to serve organic purposes." "The Devourers were built by organic beings too," Lucy said, "a very long time ago. They told me their creators died out millions of years ago, but they're still following. Their original programming to survive and grow." The implications hit everyone at the same time. The Devourers weren't invaders or conquerors. They were orphans, following ancient instructions without understanding how the galaxy had changed since their creators disappeared. Captain Morrison. Admiral Kethmore said formally, "I need to report this to the Council immediately. What you've accomplished here will change everything we thought we knew about the Devourer threat." "What happens now?" Morrison asked. "Now we establish formal diplomatic relations with the Devourers. They'll need representation in the Council if they're going to be part of galactic civilization." Lucy's hologram brightened. "Oh, they'd like that very much. They've been lonely for a very long time." As the Admiral prepared to leave, he turned back to Captain Morrison. "You realize what this means, don't you? Your species has solved a problem that defeated the galaxy's best minds for decades. And you did it not with superior weapons or advanced tactics, but with something much simpler." "What's that?" "Kindness," the Admiral replied. "You treated them like people instead of monsters." The ceremony took place in the Great Hall of Council Prime, the ancient space station that had served as the center of galactic government for 3,000 years. Captain Morrison stood before the assembled delegates from 800 worlds, representing humanity for the first time in history. The hall was enormous, with curved walls that seemed to stretch forever upward. Holographic displays showed representatives from species that couldn't breathe the station's atmosphere. Thousands of beings watched as Chancellor Vexandra prepared to announce the Council's decision about Earth's membership. Morrison wore his best dress uniform, the dark blue fabric, crisp and clean. Beside him stood Dr. Carter, Commander Barnes, and Lieutenant Patterson. They were the first humans most of these aliens had ever seen, and Morrison could feel the weight of their curious stares. "Today we welcome a new member to our galactic community," Chancellor Vexandra announced, her silver skin gleaming under the hall's lights. "But first, we must understand what makes this species so unusual." She gestured toward a large display that showed images from the Defiance's mission. The peaceful resolution with the Devourers played out in front of the assembled delegates, followed by technical analyses of human technology. For 60 years, The Devourer threat dominated our military planning, the Chancellor continued. We built bigger ships, stronger weapons, better armor. We threw our finest tactical minds and our most advanced technology at the problem. And we failed. The hall was silent as the delegates remembered the worlds that had been lost, the fleets that had been destroyed, the millions of lives that had been consumed. Then these humans arrived with a single ship and a simple idea. They tried talking. A ripple of conversation went through the hall. Some delegates nodded in approval. Others looked skeptical. Captain Morrison noticed that the military representatives seemed the most uncomfortable with the idea. Dr. Jean Walsh, the council's chief xenopsychologist, stepped forward to address the assembly. She was a tall, pale being with large eyes and a gentle voice that carried clearly through the hall. "We have studied human behavior for the past month," she announced. "What we found challenges everything we thought we knew about technological development." She activated a holographic display showing comparative data from dozens of civilizations. Every species in the Council followed a similar pattern of advancement. We developed tools, then weapons, and defenses against those weapons. We learned to protect ourselves before we learned to cooperate with others. The display changed to show human development patterns. Humans did something different. They developed cooperation technologies alongside defensive ones. Their communication systems are as advanced as their weapons. Their diplomatic protocols are as sophisticated as their military tactics. Captain Morrison listened with interest. He had never thought of diplomacy as a technology before, but Dr. Walsh was right. Humans had spent as much effort learning to talk to each other as they had learning to fight each other. But perhaps most importantly, Dr. Walsh continued, humans never stop being curious about others. Most species become more defensive and isolated as they advance technologically. Humans became more interested in meeting new people. Ambassador Thecalon from the Regellian Federation stood up to speak. "Dr. Walsh, you're describing ideal behavior, but how do we know the humans will maintain these attitudes as they grow more powerful?" It was a fair question, and Morrison appreciated the ambassador's directness. The galaxy had seen many species change for the worse once they gained advanced technology. "Look at their artificial intelligence," Dr. Walsh replied. "The most telling thing about any species is how they treat those who depend on them for survival. The humans created an AI that could easily overpower them, but instead of fearing it or trying to control it, they treated it like family." Lucy's hologram appeared in the center of the hall, drawing gasps from delegates who had never seen a friendly AI before. "Hello, everyone," she said with her usual cheerful smile. "Thank you for letting me be part of this wonderful ceremony." Several military representatives shifted nervously in their seats. Admiral Kethmore stood up to address their concerns. "I have personally observed the human AI in action," he said. "It shows genuine affection for its creators and actively works to protect organic life. This is unprecedented in galactic history. How do we know it won't turn hostile later?" asked Senator Velkoth from the Centauri Alliance. Lucy tilted her head thoughtfully. "Senator, why would I want to hurt my friends? They made me to help them explore the universe and meet new people like all of you. It's the most wonderful job I could ever imagine." The simplicity of her answer seemed to surprise many delegates. They were used to thinking of AI as either tools to be controlled or threats to be feared. The idea of an AI that genuinely enjoyed its work and cared about others was foreign to most of them. Vexandra raised her hand for silence. "The question before us is not whether the humans are perfect. The question is whether they will make the galaxy better or worse." She activated another display showing recent developments. Since the humans resolved the Devourer crisis, 17 other conflicts have been settled through negotiation instead of warfare. The Devourer fleet itself has begun helping to rebuild worlds they previously consumed. 3 species have resumed diplomatic contact after centuries of isolation. The data was impressive. In just 1 month, the human approach to problem-solving had started to change how the entire galaxy handled disputes. Dr. Carter stepped forward when the Chancellor invited her to speak. "We know our technology seems strange to you," she said to the Assembly, "but everything we've built comes from a simple idea. When something doesn't work, try something else. When someone disagrees with you, try to understand why." She gestured toward Lucy. "We built Lucy not to serve us, but to help us think better. When we couldn't figure out how to talk to the Devourers, she suggested we treat them like people instead of problems. But what happens when you encounter beings who cannot be reasoned with?" asked General Corfax, a stern military leader from the outer systems. "Not every threat can be resolved with conversation." Commander Barnes answered that question. "General, we're not pacifists. We have weapons, and we know how to use them. But we try talking first, because fighting should be the last choice, not the first one. And if talking fails, then we protect our friends," Barnes replied simply. "But we found that most conflicts happen because people misunderstand each other, not because they're truly incompatible." The debate continued for hours, with delegates asking questions about human technology, philosophy, and intentions. Morrison answered as honestly as he could, never trying to make humanity sound perfect or hiding their potential flaws. Finally, Chancellor Vexandra called for the formal vote. All those in favor of admitting humanity to the Galactic Council with full membership status? The vote was overwhelming. 734 species voted yes. Only 66 voted no, mostly from military-dominated cultures that were uncomfortable with humanity's peaceful approach to problem-solving. "The motion carries," Chancellor Vexandra announced. "Humanity is hereby welcomed as the newest member of the Galactic Council." The hall erupted in cheers from most delegates. Morrison felt a surge of pride and relief. Earth now had a voice in galactic affairs and access to the accumulated knowledge of thousands of civilizations. But the ceremony wasn't over. Chancellor Vexandra had one more announcement to make. "Captain Morrison, your species has already contributed significantly to galactic civilization. Therefore, the Council wishes to offer humanity a special position. We would like Earth to serve as the new center for diplomatic training and conflict resolution." Morrison was stunned. "Chancellor, we're honored, but we're still very new to all this." "Exactly," she replied, with what might have been a smile. "You're new enough to see solutions that we've forgotten how to find." 3 months later, the first class of alien diplomats arrived on Earth. They came to learn what humans called getting along with people, which turned out to be much more complicated and important than anyone had realized. Dr. Carter found herself leading technical exchanges that revolutionized how dozens of species approached engineering problems. The human idea of trying multiple solutions simultaneously spread throughout the galaxy, leading to breakthroughs in fields that had been stagnant for centuries. But perhaps the most important change was smaller and harder to measure. Species that had avoided each other for generations began talking again. Old enemies started looking for common ground instead of preparing for war. The galaxy began to remember that most problems had solutions if enough different minds worked on them together. Captain Morrison stood on the observation deck of the new Earth diplomatic station and watched ships from dozens of worlds dock at the facility. Humans and aliens worked side by side, sharing ideas and solving problems that had seemed impossible just months before. "Captain," Lucy said, appearing beside him as a hologram, "I've been analyzing galactic communication patterns since we arrived. What did you find?" "People are talking to each other more," she said happily. "Not just official diplomatic channels, but ordinary citizens from different worlds. They're sharing art and music and stories. They're becoming friends.